Hello, my name's Joelle Grace, and today I'm going to be repairing a coat, and I thought I would show you how I'm going to do that. So, I will warn you, this coat is not quite clean, but I didn't want to wash it and make the damage worse. So I'm going to repair it first and then wash it. This is one of my sister's coats, and it has a pocket that has a hole in it. I'm going to have to sew that up. And then the side seam, this is the main reason why I thought I'd show you, is the side seam has split. And this can be hard when you're beginning learning how to sew, to know how to sew this without a seam showing or without taking apart the whole coat, which I don't think you want to do. So I thought I would show you a little trick that I learned when I was about 12 from a friend of ours. And it is an invisible, I can't remember the proper name for it. I'll put it on the screen, but it's a invisible seam stitch so that you can sew. If you had a pillow that you wanted to sew shut and didn't want to show a seam, you could do this sew technique. Or for things like this coat, where it looks more seamless and we don't want to mess that up. I think that's all of the repairs I'm going to do, so let's get right into it. So first I'm going to pull out any of the stray threads here that are not attached, ones that have broken off. This is actually part of the thread used to stitch it, I think. Let me see. Yeah, so I could use this to repair the coat as well, because part of the thread is still there. This thread I'm just going to pull tight, pull that seam tight, and then I'm going to tie a knot in this. It's pretty short. No, I think I can get it. This will help to prevent the thread from unwinding all the way. I'm going to tie off this thread as well. So it is loose. If you put your finger on top of the knot, right before you pull it tight, just put your finger on top of it where you would want the knot to be, and that will help it to tie near the base. Sorry you can't really see what I'm doing here. It's very tight. I'll do my best. Alright, and then right here is where some of the top stitching came out. And since the thread is still here, I'm going to go ahead and thread my needle with it. And then try to mimic these stitches right here. This isn't going to be perfect and it isn't necessary, but it just makes it look a little bit more polished and factory made. Since my thread's getting shorter here, I'm having to re-thread it as I go. I'm just gonna make it as far as I can while still being able to tie a knot. And as you can see, these stitches look newer because the thread's getting put in a new way, and the thread probably was able to get cleaner when it was unthreaded in the machine. But over time, they'll start to look the same again, and when I wash it, that'll help them to match again. This is the part that they had folded under, and I'm unfolding it so that I can get as far as I can. Hopefully I can get past this little bend so that I can sew this down and not have to make a knot to help secure the thread so it doesn't just undo itself again. Alright, so I made it past this bend in the fabric where I am going to be seaming it. So I'm just going to try to get a knot in this. Sometimes I will pull on my stitches. This one's not giving much, but sometimes I'll pull on my stitches to give me some extra thread for a minute, just until I have tied the knot. So I've got to be careful not to tie the knot too close to the surface. But that gives me just a little bit extra room to tie a knot. So I've got the little loop in there. I'm just gonna carefully work it down to the base. That's good since I pulled it out a bit. And do it again. Alright, so there we go. The top stitching is done. And now I'm going to take my threaded needle here. This is not a perfect match, but it's the closest I had. I'm going to start over here. I'm going to trim these loose threads since I'm going to be sewing this area again anyway. And then I'm going to go from this side of the fabric. I'm going to come to right where this crease is, a little bit behind where that stitching ends, since some of the threads had come undone there. Pull it all the way through. Then I'm going to pick up, just match this up as well as I can. Pick up a few threads from this side. I have about 3 on here, so I want to make sure this is very secure. You can do less for the thinner, the daintier and finer your fabric is, the less threads you want to pick up typically. This one I want it to be very secure, so I'm going to pick up more.
It's jumping around. Look, it's hopping. It's looking for food.
So this side of the fabric, the side that is closest to me, we're going to pick up only a couple threads. The side further away, we're going to come in a few threads over from where we first came up. And then about 5 or 6 threads wide, we're going to Yeah, it's about 6 threads wide. We're going to go through. And then we're going to do it again right here. With thinner fabrics that aren't as strong, I have found it's best to do a few of these stitches and then pull all the stitches tight like that. Now you can't even see the thread here. With heavier fabrics, it can stand doing a stitch and pulling it tight. But with the thinner fabric, if you do that, you'll just be opening up all of your fabric, just unraveling the edge of the fabric. So again, the side closest to me, I'm only picking up 3 or 4 threads, and the side further away, I'm going to pick up about 7. So 3 or 4 from right here. And about 7 from over here. And I'm just going to continue working this stitch through the part that's already seamed. That'll just reinforce the small amount of stitching that was still intact, and it won't hurt anything over here. And that is why I'm going to pick up a larger section right here, because it's already been seamed. I don't need to be as specific. Now when we're coming back to over here where it's completely unstitched, we just need to make sure on this, it's very easy because there are wear lines. It's a bit more worn right here, so I can see the contrast between the lighter blue and the more dingy blue, so it's easy to sew it. That's another reason it's good to wash, to mend things before you wash them. Not only does it not get as worn, but it's easier to see the lines. If it is a very new garment with no fading, you can just iron down the seam allowance, trying to match the same seam allowance as before. So you can see this stays consistent. You can fold it over, iron it down, and then you'll have a nice crisp edge. If I come across any of these little threads, I'm just going to kind of tuck them in, because I've already checked they don't need to be tied down or anything, but they are attached. So again, just straight across from where I came out here, I'm going to pick up 3 or 4 threads. I'm going to come back. Once I've pulled that thread, I'm going to come over here, 3 or 4 threads over from where I started, and then come out again about 6 or 7 threads later. Then I can just pull it all tight. And continue. Once I have sewn almost to the end of this gap, I will show you what to do next. Alright, so you can see it's pretty well sewn up. It's a little bit puckered here. It's a little bit puckered here because the fabric was more stretched on this side, but I think it's pretty good. And now we just have this short gap right here. All right, so I've come to the end now, and I think it is looking pretty good. It's not perfect. There's a little gap right here, a little bit puckered, where for some reason this side of the fabric was a more stretched out because I kept checking it and it aligns perfectly everywhere except right here where there's more fabric on this side. So if I would have known that, I could have more evenly dispersed it. But from here to here is where the gap was. And now we just have this small section right here. So this thread, I've already tried to tie it off. And now I will just, let me see. I'm gonna tie a knot in this. And then I've got this needle and I will just thread it. Actually, I'm gonna have to thread it in a minute. So I'm gonna run my needle along this channel, come out a little bit longer than the length of the thread. It's about right there. And then bunched it on my needle since it's about as long as my needle. Thread this and just pull it through right there. So now the thread is inside the fabric. Now I'm just going to continue this stitch through this open gap and then a bit further to reinforce it. This is kind of like going back and forth on your sewing machine. It adds some more stitches to help hold it in place. Especially once you're closer to done, you can match your fabric together like this. Make sure you're getting a very close seam. I believe this stitch is called a blind stitch, but again, I'll put the proper name on the screen when I edit. Alright, so I made it past that open gap. I've just done a few stitches past there. I'll do one more. When you kind of get used to doing this stitch, you can start to do both sides at once. So you can see on this needle, I have a few stitches from this side and then the longer from the other. And then that way it makes it a lot faster. All right, I'm satisfied with that seam. So now I'm going to tie a knot here, as close to the base as I can. You don't want this to be a large knot because, I'm gonna go ahead and try one more time. You don't want this to be a large knot because you wanna be able to hide this in your fabric. So I'm gonna go in here, right beside where I put the knot, where I came through for the knot. And then come up again for here. And if you wiggle it, you can just get that knot to pop through on the other side. See, it's gone. And now I'll pull this a little bit tight, gather the fabric up on the thread, and cut it. Pull it tight and it's gone. Again, this will flatten out a bit more with time, but I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, you turn it off. So this pocket's going to be very easy. I could use a machine for it, but since I already have my hand sewing things out, I will just hand sew it. As you noticed, I have turned the coat wrong side out because with the older coats, they didn't sew down the lining so that you could access the inside for sewing it. So I didn't need to do that blind stitch, but I wanted to do it to show you how to do that if the coat is, if you're not able to access the inside of the coat. And now for this, I'm just going to do a simple running stitch or back stitch all along to stitch up this pocket. So this is the running stitch. It's when you can, it's a great tool so that you can keep your needle on one side. You don't have to keep going from side to side of the fabric. And you just load your needle up with stitches. You do want to be careful to make sure that you're keeping them about the same size. And you don't want to put too many on your needle because it can be very hard to pull through. But otherwise, it's a great stitch for doing a quick seam. And those are fairly even. I started out larger in the beginning, as you can see, and decided to go for a smaller stitch. You could also do, for a stronger stitch, you could do a back stitch, which is when you're going up and down, but you come behind the stitch, you come up the length of a stitch in front, and then you come all the way back here to where the end of the last stitch was. Come out ahead about a stitch length in front so that this thread is in the center, equally dividing it into 2 stitches length. And you just repeat that, and so basically you're going around in circles around the fabric, which leaves an unbroken line of stitches versus the running stitch, which is going to be a stitch, a gap of fabric, a stitch, a gap of fabric. This fills in all the space and is much stronger, and also it's pretty similar to the stitch that they did right here, which it looks kind of loose here, so I'll probably have to come back and reinforce that. But that will blend in a little bit better and be stronger. However, it does use twice the amount of thread, so it is not always practical.